Morning, this is David Scott, Marketing Manager here at PBS, and I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar on the Microsoft Dynamics NAV for Government Contractors. Today we're going to be providing an overview of the Microsoft Dynamics for Government Contractors. We will walk through a little bit on the executive dashboard. We're going to go through the web time and expense, the project setup, including some billing setup and managing funding as well. We should touch on some invoice formats, as well as managing indirect rates. So a little housekeeping to take care of. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to our PBS YouTube account later today, and that's at PBS Dynamics NAV. If you have any questions as we're going through the webinar, you can post those into the question section, and we will try to get to those, obviously if the questions are relevant to what's being covered. We will also save a little time at the end to cover some questions as well. However, if we cannot get to your questions for whatever reason, we will contact you separately, or you can always contact us as well. Later today, you should receive an email invitation to take a post-webinar survey. We really appreciate any feedback that you can offer to make this a better learning tool for everyone. So please take a few minutes and answer some questions for us. We really do appreciate that. Now, today's agenda for the webinar includes a brief introduction about PBS, and then we are going to jump right into a demonstration of the product. Okay. So PBS is a top-tier Microsoft business solutions partner, serving only the government contracting market. Our headquarters are just outside Washington, D.C., in Reston, Virginia. It gives us a unique access into the government contracting community. Also, we're an experienced leader with over 15 years of success in the government contracting market and an intelligent innovator with a Microsoft system. As a result, PBS is a direct resource to both government contractors and the Microsoft community. Microsoft Dynamics NAV for Government Contractors is a rich, robust project accounting solution. It is DCA compliant and tightly integrates with critical financial management components for government contractors. The entire financial management workflow the government contractors require, such as general ledger, budgeting, reporting, business analytics, and project accounting, are operated from within the solution without the need for a third party or add-on components. And it's also certified by Microsoft. And there I'm going to leave off, and I'm going to turn this over to our VP of Sales and Marketing, Paul Skirpsky. Paul, welcome, and I'll let you take it over from here, sir.
All right. Well, thanks, Damon, and welcome to everybody on the phone. Excited to give you guys a little bit of introduction into Microsoft Dynamics and how it can help government contractors. I've been working in the industry for about 25 years, and I've been working specifically with Microsoft Dynamics since the late 90s. So just a little bit of a background on Dynamics NAV. The solution's been around for, I guess, about 25 to 30 years now, and there's over 130,000 customers using it worldwide, making it the most widely used mid-market accounting and business solution in the world. And they've got now over 2 million licensed users of the product, and that is rapidly expanding. In fact, there's a big launch that'll be coming up this May for Dynamics 365, which is Microsoft taking NAV fully to the Azure cloud managed by Microsoft. So we're really excited about that, and we'll be having some announcements coming up on that. So Microsoft, they deliver all their solutions through partners, and what they look for partners to do is focus on vertical markets. So this is a little bit of a slide from Microsoft showing what areas they focus on. PBS, we are their lead government contract partner. So we've got clients all over the U.S., specifically focused on government contract solutions, everything from professional services companies to companies that resell products to the federal government, and then also companies that are actually making products for the government. So kind of a wide range of businesses. Some of the areas of focus for Microsoft in the last couple of years with Dynamics has been, number one, how it leverages Office 365. So for anyone that's using Office 365, there's some really great hooks into Dynamics, so everything from how it integrates with Outlook to Excel, Word, etc. In terms of Azure, it works natively with Azure, and like I mentioned, there's that big launch coming up here in the next 30 to 45 days. This box with Windows, I think this is one of the things that's been a big change for Microsoft, is they've made it where it works on multiple operating platforms. So it doesn't work just on Microsoft devices, also Android and Apple devices. So really some exciting things there. And then the last thing I'll mention here is this e-everything. So one of the things that Microsoft has found is that a lot of large technology companies want to get onto the Microsoft bandwagon. And it's been everything from e-banking. So Microsoft's got this product integrated with hundreds of different banks throughout the U.S. They've also got it integrated with the Lexmark OCR service, which is optical character recognition. So you can actually feed documents into it. Say on the PO side, you can actually read the PO document and actually create the record inside of Microsoft Dynamics. So some really exciting things happening there. And then they just announced about 6 months ago that actually several other companies like ADP, they've built an integration into Dynamics on their own to really try to open up their customer base to the Microsoft solutions. That's just a little bit of a background. Now I'm going to jump into the product and show you some of the things that Damon had mentioned to you. Before we do that, maybe the thing we can do is just get an idea of, what type of government contractors are on the phone here. So do we have companies that are services companies, manufacturers, or product resellers, so we can kind of gear that presentation towards the companies on the phone.
Okay. All right, Paul. I went ahead and put that up. So we have professional services, manufactured goods, value-added resellers, R&D, or a mix of services and goods. And right now it looks like we've got kind of a mix across the board here. A lot of professional services, several mix, and then a little bit across the other ones there as well. All right,
so we'll just give them another 15 seconds. But right now it looks like we've got over 60% are just straight professional services, 20% manufactured goods. We've got 15% as value-added resellers. And then we've got a decent chunk that's a mix of services and goods. So, we'll focus today's energy around those professional services companies based on kind of the folks that are on the call today.
Okay.
All right. So let me give you just a little brief overview of Microsoft Dynamics, how it looks and how it works. And then what we'll do is we'll kind of hop into a day in the life. So what you're doing, you're looking at the interface here. It's got what they call a role-tailored client. So based on your role, it's going to have a home page that's laid out a certain way. So certain functions that you have access to, different reports, activities, and workflows that are at your fingertips. So in this case, I've got a list of contracts, jobs, resources are my people, subcontractors, etc. Whenever I hit one of these links here, it takes me to the list. In this case, when I go to my list of customers, you see all the customers we've done business with. And from that customer list over to the right, you're seeing information in regards to how many invoices we've processed for them. Do they have any credit memos? Do they have any open orders? So it gives you quick access to information that's relevant to what you're looking for. Same type of thing on the vendor side. If I go into my list of items, so if you have products that you're either selling or making, you get a quick view of what those products are, how many do you have on hand, etc. So really making it easy to find things that are relevant to what you do on a daily basis. Over to the right, you can see that you got access, in this case, to timesheet data, expense reports that you need to improve. Each one of these links here takes me into a list. Or into a form page for me to enter data. In this case, when I go into my timesheet, I see what I've recorded time against to date, and I can go in here and enter time for the current date. So the idea is more visualization, make it easy to find data, and also analyze information. If I go over to my dashboard tool, and you can see that the dashboards are embedded right inside the accounting system, so I can go back and forth between different views there. But if I'm a user that's only looking at or only interested in dashboard data, I can also look at just dashboards. So if I'm the CEO or CFO and I don't get into the business system, I can still get the same kind of reports from either just a browser or there's also an option to just view things from a phone. So, and this data is real-time and it's also interactive. So for instance, if I drill into one of these little tiles, in this case revenue by customer, it's going to take me into an additional view that's going to show me information not only of the revenue by customer, but also to the left, these are the key projects that we have and where that work is being performed. If I select one of the particular charts, the other charts will refresh with that same filter. So in this case, when I say Fort Belvoir is one of my key customers and I want to see what projects we're performing for them, I can see that right here with some key data right at my fingertips. So it makes it easy for a user to answer questions that they have, but also interact with the data. It's not static in terms of being real time, but it's also not static in terms of if I want to analyze, I can get to additional details. So other kind of views that are available. So let me go to, I'll go to my portal. It gives me not only dashboards, but also reports. So if I go to the list of my different project reports, I have everything from a project portfolio to a project status, a burn down report, time detail, expense detail, labor utilization, etc. These reports can give me that high level view, but I can also drill into things. So in this case, I'm looking at my top project 1002 and I'm seeing trended over time details regarding revenue, cost, burden data. If I right click, I can drill through to other reports on project 1002. So if I want to look at the burn down of hours, go ahead and select burn down and you can see, by labor category code, not only the planned work, but actual work trended over time. And you can see, okay, do I have an issue? Maybe I don't have enough hours budgeted or enough funded hours for this task. So not only for executives, but also for PMs, giving them access to information that's real time and relevant to their role helps them to make better decisions in their particular job. The last thing I want to touch on here is I mentioned, Microsoft's been focused on delivering solutions to the cloud, but they've also been focused on delivering solutions from a mobile perspective. So let me just go ahead and I'm going to log in as a different user here and log into a form factor of what it would look like on my cell phone. And again, whether I'm on an Apple or Android device doesn't matter. But what you would see as a user is things like, your timesheet, trip expenses. If you had access to invoice and purchasing data, you could do that, as well as enter expenses, request PTO, or approve documents. So as a user that maybe is not in the office all the time, your phone is often one thing that's always at your side. So if I needed to record time and I'm just leaving the client site, I can go in and say, all right, I put some hours on one of these projects today, and then it drops me into today's date, and I just say, okay, I put 4 hours on there, move off. Now that time just got recorded against that project here. We'll just go ahead and refresh it. So now as a user, I don't have to worry about going back to the office and logging into my PC to do things. I can do stuff right from my phone. So that's kind of a little bit of a general overview of the different elements of the application. One thing that we're not going to get into today, but I just want to highlight for folks that have heard of the term PSA or project service, because we've got a lot of services companies, I thought it might make sense to touch on some of this. It's another module from Microsoft in the Dynamics family, and it provides your PMs with a way to not only get visibility of projects, but to better plan projects. So for people that use Microsoft Project, you're going to see some similarities in what Project Service offers. But as a PM, I would see, here's the list of all my projects that are available. I can select one of the projects, and then it drops me into the detail of that project. So everything from a project summary, which is going to show me how many hours have been estimated. I could build out my cost estimate. If you were part of the BD process, you could actually build a project quote in here. So identify, how much labor we need, what particular resources maybe, or just maybe more generically in terms of the labor categories, which builds your project team. So who are these team members that I need? So I'm assigned as the project manager. I've got some development support. I've already identified a resource. In this case, I've booked 16 hours of Dustin Johnson's time, but I also need some consulting support. We need 4,000 hours there. And throughout this process, I can identify what resources are available, what skills do I need, and make sure I can find a match of who can do a certain task for me. I can open that up inside of Microsoft Project, or they've got a view that is like a light version of Project. So you still have your Gantt chart over to the right, and you're able to identify not only the duration of time, so in this case I've got my Dynamics NAV implementation, my different tasks, the period of time the work is going to be performed under, also identify the number of hours that are needed. This is the spot where I can assign those roles. But if I'm doing some more advanced planning, what I can do is that same list of resource requirements. So in this case, what we showed before where I needed a developer and a consultant across a certain number of hours, I can go ahead and identify that I need to book resources. So when I hit the book resource button, we call it schedule board. Now from the schedule board, I can see that for that development resource, I needed certain skills. They needed to be, in terms of their development skill, good, and then also Power BI be at least good. So as I hover over these individuals, you see in this case Carter, he's proficient, right? That's the highest level. And you can define your levels, but what it allows me to do is see what resources I have that meet that skill set. And in this case on Carter for March, April, and May of this year, he's already booked. He's on, project 2025, and he's got 257 hours committed. He's got 4 hours only available in March. I guess, maybe he's got a little bit of time tomorrow, but really he's not the right resource. Then I can look at Dustin, and you see that Dustin, he's got a significant number of hours available over time. He's on one project. I guess he's already been signed to 1002 for a few hours, but I can identify that maybe I want to book him on the rest of this project and go ahead and select that period I want to book him for. And then over to the right, it gives me that ability. We're searching for availability. Go to the top here. And I can go ahead and identify that I want to book him either for the full requirement or identify just the remaining requirement, in that time forward, and either hard, propose, or soft book that resource. So for folks that are looking for, advanced tools around the upfront planning process, this kind of gives you that capability to not only identify the skills of your resources, but also identify, when they've been booked, do I have availability? Do I need to move people around? So maybe I need to pull him off of this project, and we put Dustin on there because, this one doesn't require the same skill level. So for people that have, resource loading and management requirements that are heavy, some really strong tools here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to hop back into I'll call the delivery process, right? So we've already won the business, we've booked the resources, and now we're going to execute on it. So maybe, Damon, we can just find out real quick what areas of improvement, people are looking for,
Sure.
And then we'll kind of focus on some of those as we go through that part of the presentation.
So then, as Paul's setting this up, then if you don't mind just taking a quick second, main areas of that you're looking to improve, whether it's integration with other systems, reporting capabilities, automation of manual tasks, or compliance. And I believe you can select all that are applicable. And it looks like we're over 80, jumping over 80% automation of manual tasks.
Okay.
Followed just a little bit by reporting information.
All right.
And compliance, and then integration just over 50%.
Okay. All right. We'll just give them. Looks like we got about 75% of the people that have voted.
Okay.
Someone just removed their vote. It just went down.
Actually, we got a new attendee on that.
New attendee. Gotcha. Okay. All right. So some people joined late. Gotcha. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and close it out. It looks like, reporting and automation of manual tasks are big things. So let's talk about some of those as we go through this, where I see companies that are having to do things manually, maybe because of limitations or missing capabilities. So we talked about that planning of the project, and now, let's talk about the execution of it, right? So we won the project first, and there's a whole CRM system that we're not covering today, or customer relationship management, so on your business development side. But now we've won the business, we planned it, and now it's time for the execution of it, all right? So, that same project that we started the planning process, we're going to pull that same one up, 1002. We've got information in here about the customer, so you can see that it's a DoD project. I can see who is the contact on the customer side, what type of contract it is, right? So now we're setting it up from, it's not only the planning side, now we've got to set up all the billing pieces, right? So this is a cost plus fixed fee project. If I go on to my posting tab, this shows me information. Damon talked about those billing and revenue setups. This is where I'm identifying how I'm going to recognize revenue, how I'm going to build this project. And for companies that I'm on a CPFF project, if you have some unique requirements, in this case, when it comes to the recovery of my indirect rates, I'm choosing a setup saying we can't recover G&A on travel. So you can have your indirect rate set up a certain way. So that's my corporate pool structure. But in terms of recovery, you could have a different recovery method because, maybe the government doesn't allow me to recover G&A on travel even though I'm going to allocate it. Or I could have caps on any of my rates. So you can have caps, or you could have, a different rate structure entirely if needed. So really you've got the flexibility there to really perform work the way that it's issued from both the revenue and billing perspective. And then this setup here, the fee percent, is where I'm identifying what is the fee on a CPFF that we earn. If you had fee on hours versus fee on dollars, this fee amount is for that setup, and then any kind of withholding. So these are setups at the top level. So if you think about it, this is work being performed under a certain contract vehicle. So we talked earlier about this idea of, we could win, an IDIQ or a BPA. This is where I would put that into the system under my contract card, and you can go to your full list of contracts. You can have contract documents attached to it, whether you're putting those in SharePoint or you're just linking it, inside your file server or on the cloud on a server. So you can track all those contract vehicles you have. If the work being performed, in this case under 1002, is all CPFF, that's simple. However, we've got a lot of clients that have hybrid contracts where one task might be CPFF, but you've got other tasks which could be, fixed price or T&M. So on every task within your structure, so when I'm in my WBS here, you'll see that it's got a hierarchy, just like we've shown throughout. That WBS is very similar to the way the project works. So this is how you separate different levels. So you can see that within this, I've got some fixed price tasks in a mainly cost plus project. So on every task, you can identify not only the revenue and billing formula, but also you could have things like a different task manager, different period of performance for that task. So you've got that flexibility so that when tasks are issued, I don't have to worry about trying to glue them together, right? They're all within that same project structure, in this case 1002, but every task could be of a different type. So we call that a hybrid contract. So now when I'm setting up these tasks, I want to cover some things that I see people having to do manually, and also some things that people sometimes are doing offline. So the first thing you'll see is regarding funding, right? So I've got these different tasks. If I go all the way over to the right, you can see what is the contract and funded value of that task. This contract and funded value can be any level of the WBS. So maybe I've got contract value up at this top level 001, but it's funded by individual task. Anytime you see a number with a line underneath, that means I and drill into it. So there's 2.3 million. If I drill into that number, it shows me all the history of the mods. And this mod could be, a change to the POP or a change to contract or funded value. It could be multiple things. If I needed to add a new mod, I just come down to the last line. We'll be real creative. I'll just say mod number 14. If I put in T, it puts in today's date, but maybe this mod came through in March. I'm sorry, we're in March, I guess. So we'll say March 2nd it came in. And then we'll just say that it was for $250,000. And if it's fully funded, I could type that in again, or I could just hit Control-C and Control-V and paste that in there. And then if you had a funded fee, you could enter that. So once I record that funding, what you'll see is when I come over here, the contract and funded value for the entire job just got updated. So if I drilled into this, it would show me funding across every one of those tasks. And you can see here's that mod 14 that we just put in. If I went back to the WBS, you would see the same thing from the WBS. So in that WBS, we'll go to that same task, the 001 task, and you can see it's 2.5 million now. When I drill in, again, same concept. So I see a lot of people that use spreadsheets offline to manage it. You can manage it all in the system. It rolls it up for you automatically. You can also link documents. So you get the, your contracting officer sends over the approval. Instead of you saving it offline somewhere, I can link it in the system. If you use SharePoint, you can use SharePoint to link it. And if you're using SharePoint, it also has an option to drag and drop that email in there. So you could actually take the email from the contracting officer and associate it. So that's the first thing, right, is managing that funding. The next thing is I can identify that funding can be mapped to a CLIN or ACRIN or SLIN. In terms of the type of charge, in this case, this 001-01, this is not only the level I funded, but it's also the level that people in my company charge. And you can see that this charge code is something that's visible for a timesheet and expense report because these boxes are checked. So as soon as I check that box, there is no synchronization, there is no moving files across. It's now available for people to enter time. The period of time they can enter it for, if I go to the task card again, is going to be the starting date and ending date. So as long as I put a period in there, this is going to restrict how long someone can charge time for. So now the next question people often have is, who can charge time? So this project membership, or your workforce authorization, this is who can charge time. So I can go ahead and open up that list of people, and you can see here's the folks that can charge time to that task. In this case, I've got some people, and we'll highlight Samuel here. He could only charge time from 9/1 of 2017 through 9/30. So you can restrict individuals for a certain period of time or a certain task. So John Riley can only charge to that requirements task. He can't charge, or I guess training task. He can't charge to other tasks on that job. He's restricted just to that task. These people that are charging, they can either be employees or subcontractors. So I oftentimes see that subcontractors, people want to restrict that period and don't let them charge beyond that. And then you've got approval hierarchies. So the number of levels is unlimited, and it can either be corporate or project-specific hierarchies, and it's just telling the system who's going to approve my time, what are the steps to get that approved. So that WBS structure is really key to a lot of the project setup, and this is one of the critical pieces to making sure that you can automate the billing process from a reporting both internally and to the customer, that you can deliver the types of reports and the level of detail that you need internally to manage and also to deliver that same information to the client. All right, so those are some key elements to the project setup. Over to the right, we talked about reports and dashboards. Not only are the reports and dashboards built into the product, but there's also what I'll call like online reporting. And the idea of like online or inline reporting is that I don't actually have to go to report to see how much revenue we've generated, or cost data, or AR balance. It's all right here on the particular card, this job card for 1002. So for 1002, I can see the AR balance is $85,000, almost $86,000. If I drill into that number, it shows me the detail of what is the open AR. I think people today, they're drawn to colors, so you can see Microsoft's use of colors in this case. If it's red, usually red is something that draws my attention. It's usually not something good. In this case, this is overdue. So this customer hasn't paid us for invoice number 126, and they owe us $3,000. Over to the right, I could see if I attached a file or we had notes against it. If I want to actually pull up the document, I call the customer and they say, you know what? The reason why I didn't pay invoice 126 is because I never got it. So I could say, all right, let me go ahead and send it to you. So I can send that to them, or I could print it. Maybe I want to send a printed copy. They don't accept email or fax or any kind of electronic form. I need to reprint it. So I could just go ahead and identify how I want to reprint this thing, send it over to a PDF document, and then we'll just give it 1 second here. And we'll go ahead and we'll pull up that invoice document. So now you see all the details of what I sent off to the customer here at that time back in, it looks like July of 2017. So it's pretty overdue. And you see information, whether in this case it's CPFF, so I'm seeing my indirect fee withholding. Up top, I'm seeing the labor by labor category and by person. So I can reprint that at any time, send it out to the customer. I don't have to worry about saving it somewhere to be able to retrieve it later. So just makes it easy for you to not only enter data, but also to find data to reuse it. So we talked earlier about some budgeting and forecasting, so I won't get into that as much. The funding limits here, so funding limits are used for identifying caps beyond the funding cap. So that funding cap just automatically comes over, but you could also cap things like your burden. You could cap labor by labor category code or person, or cap expenses. So all those caps are going to prevent you from billing over whatever those caps or ceilings are. I mentioned the idea of budgeted rates. And then finally, the last piece we'll touch on here is this idea of an alert. So I think alert is like another level of reporting. So instead of me running a report, alerts are triggered based on a condition being met. So in this case, this alert is comparing what's been billed or spent. So billed means I've processed the invoice. Spent means I've consumed that amount of cost that will be billed. And then I can compare it to what's been funded or budgeted. And then whatever percent I identify in here, the system is going to trigger an email. So at 50%, 65, and 75, I want to send an email out to the project manager, in this case, Jay Riley. And then optionally, I could also send it out to other people with an email chain, whether they're people inside of your organization or outside. That email can get triggered, and basically each night the system will look to see, all right, did the condition get met? It did. I'm going to send out an email. So those are some key things in terms of project setup. I want to touch on one other element, and I'm going to go to a T&M project to do that. So if you think about a cost-plus project, I'm not defining labor rates because the labor rate comes from what we're paying the resource. Where with a T&M project, so in this case, this Project Kempster, it's T&M, and now the pricing comes from labor category codes. So in here, I'm telling the system by labor category code and effective date, what is the billing rate? So if you look here, you can see that this labor category code is called writer, effective 1/1/2019, the rate is $180. Just to show you how easy it is to put one in, I'll just go ahead and enter one. So let's say writer and effective 1/1 of this year. I didn't need to type in 2018 because it knew we're in the current year. That rate is $175. So you're able to put those escalating rates in the system, and I don't have to worry about knowing to go back and identify, the rate escalated. I got to put that new rate in there. This date can also be any day of the month. It doesn't need to be the 1st of the month. It could be the 5th of the month, 7th of the month. It doesn't need to be at the beginning of your timesheet cycle. So for folks, oftentimes this is an area, if you have T&M work that people do manually, because systems can't support sometimes this idea of a rate change in the middle of a timesheet period. And what the system will do is it'll bring in hours at both rates if people work across that period. So you don't have to worry about, making changes offline or just billing the lower rate because, of a system limitation. Any of these screens, you can open them up in Excel, and you can actually enter data in Excel and refresh it back if needed. So when it comes to billing T&M projects, it limits or eliminates rounding issues because of the fact that it brings in, for that timesheet period, the number of hours at a particular rate. It doesn't bring in each particular entry. It summarizes it from a billing perspective, but it keeps the detail from a timesheet perspective. So people really like that. You can also copy in your contract pricing. So I was talking with someone yesterday that had a GSA contract, and they said, we do a lot against that contract vehicle, and it's frustrating to have to put that data in every time. So you could put it once into the contract, and then you can go ahead and say, our rates effective this year, I want to bring in all of our GSA rates into this project. So it'll bring them all in. You could also bring them in at maybe a 3% discount and offer a discount off the whole schedule, or you can discount individual labor category codes once you bring it into your pricing setup here. So again, when I think about automation, those are some things that we're helping people to automate, some of those manual tasks. And then the last thing on a T&M is that the resources working on the project, you can identify what is their project labor category code. So in this case, Andrew, and go ahead and we'll pull up Andrew. And what you see is that Andrew, his corporate labor category code is consultant 1, but that's a bad example. I guess Andrew is also a consultant 1 on this project. Let's see if one of these other folks, maybe Beth is a better example. So let me set up another person so we can give you an idea how this works. So we'll go ahead and we'll pick John Riley.
He's already on it.
Oh, he is on it.
Tom Taylor. All right.
All right, so we'll pick 180. Let me see what Alex is. So Alex is a developer 1. So when I bring Alex in, it defaults his labor category code, but then I can come in and say, Alex, he's a consultant 1 on this project. So now, even though his corporate is developer 1, I can override it. So thanks for the help on that, Damon.
Not a problem.
You have it right in front of you. Sometimes you don't even see it. All right, so those tools together really help you to manage projects and automate things that you might be doing manually today. So that's what really helps people to fully automate that billing process and make it simple to execute on new projects. And then the last thing I want to touch on before we go over to the timesheets and expense reports, I mentioned this idea of these activity boxes. There's also wizards that help you to set up things quickly. So one of the things that you find, I was talking with somebody, I guess it was a couple nights ago, about enterprise systems and the power that they have, but the complexity to create new records. And one of the things that Microsoft has done is added these wizards as a way to simplify things. So I showed you projects that were already set up, and if you think about how hard is it to set it up, the wizard makes it easy. So I want to create a new job. Do I want to create it from an existing project, yes or no? So it just takes me through a series of questions to make it easier. So it's saying, okay, here's the new job. It defaults to the job number for me, but I could override that if I wanted. and we'll call this AI project for DARPA. And then, who is the customer? So I'll just pick whoever the first one is. And I could say, hey, what's the effective date, right? So this project starts today, and it's going to last through end of the year. I click next, and then it's saying, okay, do you want to copy this from another project? And we had another one that was similar. It's called Acoustic Kitty, and we're going to just go ahead and we'll copy, we'll copy this top set of charge codes, right? So I could pick, what I want to copy from and to, and identify just the certain tasks I want. And then we're going to say that I could copy if it had the sale entries already set up, so those T&M labor rates. I could copy that type of stuff in, and then I'd say okay. And now what happened is I just created a new job in just a handful of keystrokes. So Microsoft's using that whole wizard and template idea to make things easier and efficient for people, and we can see it certainly working to get higher utilization out of the system. All right, so before I go over to timesheets, Dan, maybe the thing we can find out is, if people are maybe using some Microsoft products today, and if they are, which ones, and maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the things that, the integrations into those products and how it might help.
All right, sounds good, Paul. So yeah, I put up a quick poll where what Microsoft products does your company currently use? Office 365, Outlook, SharePoint, Excel, and others. All of those, you can pick more than one. Also want to remind you, if you have a question, you put that in the question section. And again, we'll try to get those as we go through. We've had a couple of questions, Paul, if you want to address them regarding pricing and implementation time frame. If you want to talk about the license a little bit.
Yeah.
Right now, it looks like 100% on Excel.
Okay.
Not surprising.
Right.
Looks like just about 80% on Office 365.
Okay.
Around 90 on Outlook, 50 on SharePoint, and about 30% on other.
Okay.
Somebody go ahead and close the turn back over to you.
All right, sounds good. So that's good to know. I mean, one of the things that I mentioned is that, how it works with Excel, the fact that, I could actually send data to Excel, make updates in Excel, and bring it back in, and it actually runs it through the business logic so you don't create issues for yourself. All right, so, and you'll see those kind of functions on all these pages, send it to Excel, send it to Word. They have an option also where I can take an invoice, send it to Word, and make an update to the format and actually import it back in. So some neat things to help people to do more themselves. I think that's kind of the thing Microsoft wants to do, is give the power to the customer and the end user. All right, so we talked earlier, whether I'm entering it from a phone or, just my interface, and I'm just in a browser. And I thought today was Thursday, but it's Wednesday. It is Thursday. It is Thursday. I thought it was Wednesday. I didn't enter time yesterday, right? So I would have gotten the email, right? So there is an automated email routine that can look, did the user enter time from yesterday? If they did, great. If they didn't, send them an email and remind them to do that. Also remind you at the end of the timesheet period. So I got the email. I didn't enter my time yesterday. I can go to the project that I worked on. So I put 4 hours in this project. If I needed to put some comments in there, I can just go ahead and hit my comment box. And then we'll type in for Wednesday, completed last round of testing, close it, and basically I've just saved the comments for there. If I made a change to a previously saved cell, so I go back and we say, you know what, I actually worked 5 hours on that task on that day. Now it's saying, okay, you need the reason for the change, for that 5 hours. So I need to go ahead and enter that reason. And the reason for the change there was, forgot that I worked 5 hours. And the thing that is nice is that these reasons, they're separated, right? So you could see that the reason for the change is a separate table. So now if you want to provide to the government, hey, what's someone's timesheet for the reason for change? You can print that, and it's not going to show these other comments, which are really meant for, either internal purposes, or they could be, we use them for customers to give the customer feedback on, what was some detail behind what was the employee doing that particular day. But it's that simple. It's easy for a user to do it. They can do it from a phone. They can do it from this interface here, really making it so end users, little training, high capabilities, and giving them access from multiple devices. So that's doing timesheets. If I was an approver of or processor of expense reports, so I'm logged in as an accounting role, and I could process expense reports, which would be ones that have already been approved. But what we'll do is I'm going to go in as an employee and say, okay, I need to enter an expense report. So if I need to enter an expense report, I would just hit this button for new expense, and then I'd put a description in here. So March travel to new clients. If I received in advance, I could enter that in there. It defaults it for the whole month, but let's just say that it was just a 1-week trip, right? So I went from the 6th to the 10th. I could just enter the expense lines, but if I'm traveling based on per diem, so we'll say I'm going to see a couple of customers in Alabama, and I can type in, or I can pull up from the list. So when I start typing, it just filters it down. So it just picks the one locality that started with ABB. There's only one county in there. It defaults the period to just whatever I traveled. Click next. And then I can say, what job was I traveling for? So we've been using that job 1002 the whole time. Again, same idea. If I start typing, it filters it down. And then it's saying, what code for lodging? And we'll pick the lodging code. And for meals, it's per diem. It gives me the grid in case, maybe the customer gave me lunch on this day. I can uncheck that. Click next. It tells me what my lodging ceiling is. I'd enter my actual lodging, put in my actual tax, click finish, and now it kind of builds my expense lines for me. So if people travel based on per diem, and you can see it does the 75% first day and last day. And then if I had other expenses, I could just go ahead and we'll record them at the line. And let's see, all right, I guess I would have to fly there. So let me see if I have an option for airfare. No, well, we'll say I drove there. I don't know how many miles it is, but it's probably a lot. So we'll say that I use my own car, and this was 310, and then I would just put in whatever the distance was, right? So round trip, it was 1,000 miles, and now it calculates, what based on the mileage rate for that period, what I'm going to get reimbursed there. And then if I had any type of receipts, I could attach those, and then once I finish the process, I just hit my submit button, and then this would start that whole workflow for approval. So if I'm recording expenses on an expense report, it follows that process, and now you can see that once I hit submit, now everything is grayed out. I can't change any of this stuff unless somebody rejected it. There's also a function on your cell phone where you can just record trip expenses, right? So the idea there is that, I go out to lunch and I don't want to, spend a lot of time typing it in. I can just record the fact that I went to lunch, this amount, I went with these people, and then it shows in my trip expenses. You can see which ones have receipts attached to them. Then I can take and move those to expense reports, or I can import charges, right? So if I had a credit card, a file with a credit card, I could actually just import all those expense charges and then come in here and code it. So we've got a bunch of different options to process your expenses, but it's just an easy way for people to record and to submit and get paid for my expenses. And the thing that's nice is you also see over here what status it's in, right? So I've got all these expense reports that might be submitted, but they're not approved yet. and then I can contact my approver and say, hey, you know what, let's see which ones. So I've got my submitted ones. I'll set a filter. I submitted this expense report back in 2013 for a seminar, but it never got approved. So maybe I can reach out to my expense approver and find out. So you've got more visibility of things. All right, so we've talked a lot today about the type of direct expenses that a lot of folks are, I guess, dealing with on a daily basis, whether it's timesheets, expense reports. We're not going to go through subcontracting and purchasing or any of the inventory stuff. There's a lot of capabilities there. I do want to talk a little bit about indirect rates. We talked earlier about cost-type projects and managing those and some of the complexity that it can bring, but the ease and flexibility that we provide that makes it simple for you to manage those kind of projects. So I've got up my indirect rate structure, and I want to spend just a couple minutes to talk about how it's set up and how it's managed here, and then we'll close things out with a little bit on the billing and reporting side. So, I've got my indirect rate structure, so there's really 4 steps to setting it up. So step 1 is you just set up your pools. So this is all of your final pools and intermediate pools. So in this example, I've got a fringe, I've got an overhead company site, client site, subcontract, material handling, and G&A. So the key requirement here is the sequence has to be done in a way that if you've got an intermediate pool, that it lives above the final pool that cost gets loaded into. So in this example, fringe, in step 1, it gets calculated, and then a portion of the fringe, it goes out to projects, and then a portion is going to go to overhead and G&A. So that's why it needs to be above those pools. The next step is, for each of these pools, you've got to calculate what the pool and base is. So for this overhead client site pool, I'm accumulating all my overhead accounts. And my base is my direct labor with fringe applied at actual from step 1 for all my client site departments. So this is how the rate gets calculated. Then the allocation is, once the cost is accumulated, how does it get spread out, either to other accounts and departments, or it goes out to projects. So in this case, that overhead client site pool is a final pool, and it's going to go out to projects at an actual rate and a provisional rate. Then the final step is, I'm telling the system, what is that provisional rate that we're using, for allocations and billings? If you had a different billing rate, you'd have a budgeted rate on the project, which is project specific. But in this case, I've got a budgeted rate of 52%. My final rate is 54%. The system can actually do that final billing for you too. So really helps to automate these things that you might be doing manually today. And one of the other things that you might be doing manually today is building out your incurred cost submission. So we've got another wizard that takes you through that process to actually build out your incurred cost schedule. So for folks that need to submit that every year, this is going to build out a great portion of it and help you to be able to produce those without having to do all the manual work that you might be doing in Excel today. Then we've got exports out to Excel, but a lot of that stuff is built into the system and helps you to move that from a manual task to a more automated task. So now the last thing that Damon talked about that we're going to cover is on the billing side, and I'll just quickly walk through the process of how you would generate invoices. So whether it's a final invoice, for a rate variance, or it's your monthly invoice, it kind of follows the same routine. So it goes from left to right, this billing process. So I hit this button that says create invoice. It pops up a window that says, okay, what job do you want to create it for? And you can do a range of jobs, but in this case, I'm on 1002, so it feels like this is probably the job you want to do it for. Billing group, what this allows me to do is I can identify that I want to produce an invoice like this job. We may be producing just one invoice every month, or some clients have an invoice for every task. So you can identify, how many invoices and what tasks get billed under an invoice. And then I identify the period I want to run it for, and I either say okay or I schedule it. And then scheduling would just run the process to create the invoice. It creates what we call an invoice proposal, which is a pre-invoice. It's got workflow built into it for approval, so I can send this out for approval. And once it gets approved, it goes to a posted invoice, which is that final document. And we pulled one up earlier, right? This is the same form where I could reprint this and look at it in different ways. So it makes it simple for somebody to reprint or print for the first time an invoice and be able to reprint it as needed and send it in different forms. So whether it's PDF, Excel, or Word, and then the last option that people, if you're still using government forms, so if I need to print this off on a 1034, 1035, I can use those government forms still as a way to do that. So that gives you an idea of some of that billing process, some of the standard formats. And then the last thing I want to close this out with is some things on the reporting side, because I saw that people had a lot of interest and focus on reports. Microsoft's got several reporting tools that are built into the application. One of the elements that you can leverage is something called Power BI. So Power BI is a reporting engine. It's browser-based, like I mentioned. Also allows me to build reports on the fly. So if I go ahead and I click my new page, it kind of drops me into an empty canvas. And then from here, I can decide, what do I want to build a report about? So we've got different data elements that I can report on. So in this case, we've been talking about projects all day. So I'm going to look at across all my jobs. So I'll just click this button that says job description. You can set filters on the job if you want. And we'll say that what type of information. So I want to see what's funded. Hold on one second. I clicked off, so it's showing me over here that funding. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this, and I'll put it inside of this report. So I'm going to look at what's funded by job. But also I want to see, what is the total billings for that job. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll open up some detail here, and we'll say, what is the total, there it is, billed amount. And I want to see the total number of hours that have been charged. So this allows me to just build a quick view of that information. I can set filters on this type of stuff. I can also create other charts related to it. So over here to the right, this funded amount, we'll leave that. Let's reuse it. And we want to say that I want to look at the funding, but look at it by customer. Let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. So we'll say bill to customer name. How much funding across all these jobs do the customers have? So you can see that we've got over 1.5, we got 1.75 million in funding for our Fort Belvoir projects. Let's turn this into a pie chart, right? So now I've got some visibility of not only funding by customer, but here are the projects and what's been funded and billed amount. And then down below, people in a services company are your greatest resource. So let's look at what people are working on projects and the number of hours. So we'll do the same thing here, and we'll say I want to look at the job, and I want to look at the number of hours, but in this case I want to look at it by person. So we'll say job, and then we're going to look at the hours worked, and then we'll say what are the people that are actually performing that work. So I'm going to grab the name of the resource, so the resource name over there. And then what we're going to do is, you're able to move these things around. So if I wanted to put, I don't want to put hours on the top, we'll put the resource on the top, and I could change this to where maybe I want to see, what projects are the people working on, and I want the projects to be up top. So now I can see that, Alex is working on all these different projects, and same idea if I say, hey, what are the Fort Belvoir projects? So you can see what they are, and now I see here's the people working on the projects, and the number of hours. So gives you a little insight to the reporting, and it looks like we're right at 12. So I'm going to go over just 1 minute, Damon, if it's okay with you. I've got a bunch of questions. I'm just going to answer a couple of them, to keep things in time. So, all right. So one is, I'm going to cover two easy ones. So the first is the job number alphanumeric? And it is. It's a 20-character alphanumeric field. There's a question about, does the system have importable CONUS and OCONUS per diem rate functionality? And it does. You can actually, whether you go to the State Department or GSA website, you can download that into Excel, and then we've got uploads into that. So, and Ashley, you're welcome. I guess I answered one of your questions. It was one of the last ones to come in. So the other questions that are on here, we'll go ahead and we'll follow up with you to answer them, but we appreciate your time. Have a wonderful Passover, Easter, whatever you celebrate, and hopefully we get a chance to talk to you soon. Take care.